let's say that you have a clock that you've been using for months now, but you've just noticed that it's gotten very grimy and guttery inside of these little pins and all around. What can you do to clean it? Well, here's how to clean it. Now, here's what you're going to need for what we're doing here. You're going to need some baby wipes or some sort of antibacterial wipes. Don't use something like rubbing alcohol or, rubbing alcohol, because that's how you get magnets loose and whatnot. Here, I'm going to show you a little what happens when you use rubbing alcohol. So this cube I have here, I used rubbing alcohol on the, wrong cube, on the inside of it for like a solid month after I got the cube. And what happened was that right here you can see that those are cracking. Can you see it? Sounds really bad. Cracking. And that's because it actually melts the plastic and the glue off, which then means I had to completely re-glue that cube, and right now it's a maraca, and I can't move the magnets, can't adjust them, so that's why you don't use rubbing alcohol. Okay, so I'm having to refilm this bit because the original footage was out of focus. But basically, all you're going to want to do is just, if you have tape around the edges, you're going to want to remove it. And if you have screws or something, then you're going to want to unscrew them. So another optional thing is tape and some sort of cutting method, like a knife. And I highly recommend it, but it's not necessary if you're doing this. And then now all you're going to want to do is just lift off the front plate like that. Another thing I want to show you is that this, when you have something like those lines around it, they will naturally appear. Like, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're dirty, but when it's really bad like we have here, that's how you can know where it's like, here, so look at this. So we have the lines there. I can smudge them. I can smudge them off. That means this clock was definitely due for a cleaning. Yeah, so you're just going to want to take off your two clear clock faces and set them aside. Actually, we can work on those right now. So instead, we're going to set aside our actual clock. So we'll just put that over here. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a baby wipe, or whatever we're using to clean, and we're just going to go inside the clock faces and we're just going to wipe it down. Get all that excess factory lube, or whatever lube is on there, and all that dirt and dust and grime off of it, and make sure it's nice and clean. Another thing you can do is that once you wipe it off, if there's still like lots of water or whatever from your wipe, you can definitely go over it with a paper towel or a microfiber cloth and then just wipe it all off. That does not hurt the clock at all. Unless if you're like really harsh with it, then it would hurt the clock. But yeah, I also like to get around on the edges here, because the tape there, it can really, like, it can leave residue, which can build up over time and just isn't good for the plastic. So yeah, so there's one, and then the same thing on the other one. So one thing that's really annoying about clocks is that it's basically the only event where you have to clean your clock very often, or else for two reasons. Number one, it just looks very bad when your clock is dirty. And number two, when your clock is dirty, since there are so many moving parts, if there's like little sand bits in there, it can really get into your gears and into your pins and whatnot. and can get basically like sandpaper, like sanding down the inside of your clock and making it either like really loose or just really grimy and guttery. And that's why you have to clean your clock often. Doesn't even matter if you use it that often. Like, you should still clean it because still dust can get into it. Yeah, so those are our faces. So we can set that aside. And now we can start working on our clock. So, if you have a clock and your clock is very old, like you got it basically when the clock came out, like mine here, you're going to want to, when we take this apart, see those are all our pieces, you're going to want to take the center clock and you're going to want to put it somewhere else compared to your edge clocks and your corner clocks so you can tell them apart. And I'll show you why. So, on these clocks, on these like really old ones, you can see the left one is the center. No, the right one's center, and the magnets are a little bit closer than the left one, which is the edge. Which they fix this on the newer clocks, or newer in quotations, just the ones that haven't been. The original models that were a little bit newer, they fixed that on there, but on these old ones they haven't. So we're just going to want to put those somewhere separate so that then we don't lose track of them. Most of the time though, it's just like, you know, you can tell black from white hopefully apart. So put all the whites over here, corners over there, or edges over there. We'll put the corners in this corner. Yeah. And then the blacks over here. So, now we're basically just going to do the exact same thing, except you can be a little bit more into there. Make sure to also get really inside these pins. That's where most of the dirt goes into. Because we don't have the pins there, we can just really get into it and clean it all off. So we're going to do this for both faces. Or no, not faces, plates. So really get in there, get all of that lube out, especially inside the pins. You're not going to get all of it. It's going to be pretty impossible to get all of it. But just try to get everything that you can. It doesn't matter if you have to spend 10 minutes sitting here trying to get all this dirt, dust, and debris out of your clock. Just make sure you get all of it off. So now that we're here with everything apart, while I'm doing this, I can tell you what all the different things are. So these are the pins. Those pin-looking things. Those are what connects the two clocks. So when we have something like this at the top here, if we have the pin off the top, it'll connect this clock and all the four around it, because it'll connect the corner, and then it'll also connect the edge like that. But when we push it down, it'll still be connected to this clock, but it's going to connect the edges on the back. And that's basically how these clock edges work, and how the clock gears work. So it's very simple. It just looks complicated. Alright, I think I got most of this here. I'm going to finish this one, and then I'll get back to you and show you how to do the rest of them. Okay, so now that we've cleaned off our faceplates, we can start working on the rest of the clock. So, when you have a really old clock, again, like mine, I've used it thousands of solves in this, and because of that, after a long time, the color will change. You see here, that's not a perfect white, that's an off-white. You'll get dirt and grime in it. That's just the nature of a clock, you know? It's just gonna happen. And that's fine. You know, it doesn't affect the performance. It's just if you have a really, like, let's say you got it when it came out and you just haven't cleaned it until now for whatever reason, and if it looks like that and you can't get the dirt out or something, chances are it's not dirt, it's just a stain, a small stain, and that's completely fine. It's not going to change the performance of your clock, but just try to get it out. Okay, so for when you're working on the corners, you're going to want to get really into all these little corners, edges, crevices, and just get your little towel into all of those. And make sure to clean off the faces too, because that's where most of the lube is going to be. So try and clean it all off until, I guess, it's mostly about judgment. So, yeah. And then for something like the centers, it's the same thing. Just go into each and every little gear point and get all the lube, all the dirt and grime off. And then just do that all the way around until it's all gone. Basic stuff. So now, for something like this pin, I like to take one edge and I like to wrap the towel around it and then just twist it around like that until I get all the stuff off. Again, pins are going to be the dirtiest things because it's the things that are most exposed. It's exposed at all times. Like half of it is exposed at all times. And then as well as that, it's pushing in and out inside of your clock. So it's basically pushing dirt into your clock as you use it. Again, microscopic bits, but still bits. So this is what's going to be most dirty. So make sure you spend a good amount of time on this. The more time you spend on your pins, the better. Until it looks most clean. Yeah, and you're just going to repeat that for all the other bits. Those in. Yeah, so set these off to the side. And yeah. Okay. So now that we have cleaned off all of our pieces, it's time to get to lubing if you want. If you don't want to do this, then just look at the timestamps in the description and it'll skip over to when I assemble everything. But if you do want to lube, stay tuned. So, what we're going to do is we're just going to take one of our faceplates and on the rims of these, we're just going to put a little bit of lube right there, so it looks good. Don't put a lot or else it'll get gummy and it'll lose its magnetism because there's like a layer of lube in between the magnets and the pieces. So just going to put that there, and then now we're going to take our pieces and we're going to squish them on here. It doesn't matter which orientation they are because it is impossible to get a parity even if you're like putting it in randomly and you're trying to get a parity. It's impossible on the clock. So you can just put them any orientation. We'll just solve it once we're done. So I'll put in these now. Remember to put in black side down for white and white side down for black. And then, yep. So as we move these will get all mixed in and it'll be great. And then we're just going to do the same thing here. So we're just going to put some lube right on the edge of these pieces. Right there. And we're going to put these in. Remember, if you have an older clock, to put the center into the center, because it'll just make your clock perform a whole lot better. And then now, same thing. Remember, put white down for white, white down for black, and black down for white. So, since we have the pins, we're going to put the white side down. And then now, we're just going to take these. This is the most annoying part. And we're going to try to assemble these. The magnets will help a lot with assembly, but you shouldn't rely on them. What's happening here? So, yeah. Okay. And there is our clock fully lubed. So, now what we're going to do is we're going to do 1 or 2 solves and see if any lube leaks into the faceplate. And if it does, that's a bad thing. We'll just take the cover off, wipe down the faceplate, then put it back on. Not a big deal, but it's just you don't want that in there because then it's going to make the face glossy. Just going to make it hard to solve, you know. So, solve our clock. Yeah. Sure to get all mixed in. And this seems about good. I can see here. Don't know if you can tell on camera, but right on that faceplate there is a bit of lube, and we don't want that because it's just going to make it harder to solve, harder to recognize how the face is. So we're just going to pull off the face cover like this. Going to take our towelette, and we're going to wipe that down, and we're going to go into the faceplate, wipe that down, and then put it right back on. Mix it more, and boom, all done. And just like that, you have cleaned your clock. So, one last thing. So yeah, so if you have screws that you want to put it back in, just put your screws back in like regular. But if you don't, if you want to take them out, then a couple of things. Number one, if you have nuts stuck in here, just take the screw it in slightly, and pull it out. That seems to work for me. And number two, yeah, so, and then now what we're going to want to do is that we're going to want to take our tape, and we're just going to want to put it on all of our edges. I'm very particular. I like to use a matte tape, so that then, when it goes over my edges, I get the grippiness of the glossy on the dials, but not on the edge, so my finger doesn't get very caught on the edges there. That is a very particular thing, though, and it's not going to change a lot whether you have that. But it's just something I like to add. Just going to add it there, and then now we're just going to use our cutting tool, whatever that may be, and cut it just like that. Smooth it out. I like to start with opposites, so you'll put down a piece of tape and then you'll do the opposites, just that then there's less likely of a chance of it to come apart as you're putting on the other pieces of tape. One thing while I'm doing this, I forgot to mention earlier, is that you're going to want to clean your clock around once or twice a month. I haven't cleaned this clock for a while, so that's why it was so dirty. Shouldn't let it get that dirty. Should clean it at least once a month. If you haven't, it's not the end of the world. It's just going to take a little bit longer to clean, and yeah. But just try to keep on top of that, because that's going to give you your best performance in your puzzle. So I'm going to put down the final piece of tape, and then we'll do a test solve. Now, I lube this clock for this video so that then I could show you how it works, how to lube it and whatnot, but I usually use an unlubed clock because I like how much the magnets are. I like really strong magnets in clocks. So it probably won't be that great of a solve, but I'm still going to do a solve to show y'all how good this is. So -2, -5. Oh, okay, that's fairly good. Grab a timer. So let's see how this does. So -5, -2, -5. Okay, DNF, whatever. But there you go. That's how to completely lube, to clean, disassemble, and assemble, and lube your clock.